crucial day today in the road to the goods and services tax, and that is because the government has introduced crucial pieces of legislation in the Lok Sabha, hoping for the passage, the debate and the discussion on the bills on the 7 hours being allotted by the Parliament Business Advisory Committee. Let's go back to our panel of experts. And Pratik, let me come to you now on the points that were raised early on. And that has to do with the clarification as far as the single registration issue is concerned, which is a big one. In fact, just at our India Business Leader Awards ceremony on Friday, Arundhati Bhattacharya making a plea to the finance minister saying, look, this is what we need. But sources tell us that state governments perhaps may hold back on that, and this is not an assurance given by the government just yet. How crucial is this going to be, Pratik?
Yeah, so I mean, look, for service sector, GST is turning out to be a big issue because A, they will have to take multiple registration, and B, the law is not clear in terms of where do you pay tax in case I have multiple offices and I'm supplying services to multiple offices. I think that the issue of single service tax registration has been debated a lot. I think states are resisting. Let's see what happens. I'm not too hopeful whether industry would get that. But I would like to point out one very good amendment which is part of this act, which perhaps we missed in the initial part. There is a section 77 which has been inserted in the CGST law and both in the other laws as well, which says that if you have paid local taxes instead of in IGST, or if you have paid IGST instead of local taxes by mistake, okay, then you'll get the refund of the tax wrongly paid, and you won't have to pay any interest. Now this comes as a major relief for the services sector, because the sector is grappling with a situation of ending up paying local state taxes instead of IGST and vice versa, because the laws are not clear, and because now there is a provision that interest will not be charged. At least they can rest assured that it's only a cash flow issue in that sense, that if they paid excess tax, they'll have to claim a refund. But that's very good. But on the single service tax registration, I mean, my advice to the industry would be that they should start preparing, assuming that it's not going to happen. And if it happens, it's really a bonus. But one will have to start preparing, assuming that they'll have to take multiple registration and in every state from where they're doing business.
What is this going to mean, Mani, if, as Pratik pointed out, and this is what we are given to understand from our sources within government, that at this point in time, there seems to be no breakthrough on the issue of single registration. How big a nightmare is this going to be for the services sector?
Okay, if the services sector needs to have multiple registrations, and when I'm talking of services sector, I'm talking of all of them. So includes banking, includes insurance, includes telecom, includes IT, ITES. It's really going to become very, very difficult for them. It's going to become extremely difficult for them. But the way I would look at it is I would hold my opinion till the working group that has been set up by the government hears industry and submits its recommendation. I think a couple of minutes back, we heard our good friend Mr. Giri mentioning about some representations which have been made to the highest level, and the fact that these working groups have been formulated with the blessings of the highest level of the government. And therefore, what I would say is that we need to take these working groups very, very seriously. We also need to wait and watch for the GST rules, which are going to be discussed by the GST Council on 31st. And then we need to decide in terms of what the services sector would be required to do. Because going ahead and rushing in with some preparation which may not turn out to be relevant later on would also be an equally difficult exercise. With this, we also have to keep in mind one very important fact. When we think of the services sector, possibly most of us are today looking at the number of registrations that they might be required to take. But we have to keep in mind that each registration entails a monthly return. And therefore, if therefore the registration, really speaking, is not too much of an issue. The larger issue is in terms of the compliances which will lead to the returns. Because the returns are going to come out through an IT system. So that, to my mind, is a very big thing for the services sector to be addressed.
You're right there. Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, let me come to you, sir. We've got a GST Council meeting on the 31st. As both Mani and Arun have been stressing, these committees have been set up to look at industry-wide issues and industry-specific issues. If I were to ask you to put down on the table, sir, 3 or 4 crucial issues that you believe the government ought to address by way of the rules, what would those be?
See, basically, textile sector requires a different dispensation and attention. It is one of the most decentralized sectors. The spinning of the yarn is an organized sector, whereas weaving is totally decentralized sector. Processing is organized, and the garments are unorganized. So to collect the taxes from there, and then if it is going to have input tax credit breaks, that will be a huge humongous task. So that is separately to address by the industry, that is by the group, first one. Gem and jewelry is another case of large number of artisans working, and then the gold moving from one place to another in different farms and different conditions, etc. That is again a nightmarish thing if we are going to have a complete GST formula completely. That's the second one. The third one is, of course, regarding the service sector. When you are talking about the central registration, when you point out, it's not merely registration because it returns. Much more than that is regarding the services, input services and input goods are coming in. All of them will get centralized, and then distribution of this to the various states. And in some cases, in some of the states, the same company has to file before the state registration. Other one is central GST. That is going to be even more nightmarish. So, unless the government listens to this particular centralized registration here for the service sector, it is going to be a nightmarish thing for the industry. The three things at least I must put.
Okay, Rohan Shah. No, thank you very much for pointing those out. Special dispensation for textiles, gems and jewelry, and at least as far as the services sector is concerned, that much needed clarification on single registration or central registration. But Rohan Shah, to avoid the nightmarish scenarios that both Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran and Mani are pointing out, anything that you want to add to the table that the government must address, sir?
So, one is this whole situation of valuation, and particularly valuation in the context of services. We basically have taken the customs valuation laws and applied them to the GST. And one of the challenges you're going to have is that in the context of services, you've never applied the customs valuation laws. So the situation you're going to have is where you don't have an acceptable transaction value, or where services are inter se related or connected entities, what is the basis you're going to follow? And the basis really is that if you don't have what you call the transaction value, you will have to go to identical or comparable services. And that has been a nightmare for goods from 1988 when we got the new customs valuation laws. We've had litigation almost from day one from there. And that position continues to remain unresolved and litigious. So one of the issues, besides centralized registration, besides gridlocked credit because you're registered in so many different states, valuation for the purposes of services, I think is going to be another major challenge. This whole setup of the 7 groups that you have, to me, these are also the 7 most contentious industries in terms of having the greatest amount of problems in the context of GST. And therefore, whether you take telecom, whether you take banking and insurance, whether you take the petroleum sector, those besides the ones which were already mentioned, these are the ones which have raised the most amount of issues in representations as to why their business nuances are not capable of being addressed under the current law. And I think this effort, which will go on till the 10th of April in phase 1, and then phase 2, they will involve also officers of the state government, because the states need to be sensitive to these issues. I think that particular effort is almost as important as the effort in terms of the further rules which are going to come, which are of course all critical. So the combination of these new rules, which we might sort of be in the public realm by the end of the month, so 31st and immediately after, and everything that we see specific to these industries which have the major problems, I think the amalgam of the two is really when you're going to get to a stage where you can finally take a call in terms of saying 2 things. A, is the law supportive? And B, has the law, which is supposed to be a generic law for the whole country, still got enough nuancing to look after the needs of some very difficult industries?
Fair point. Arun, you've excited everybody on the panel with this news that the highest quarters of government seem to be responsive to what industry has to say. But in terms of the issues that have been raised by the top industrialists with the government, with the Prime Minister specifically, besides, of course, giving more time and perhaps pushing the 1st of July to the 1st of September, can you tell us what are the specific issues that they've raised?
Some of them have been mentioned here. For example, a registration process, a single registration for the service sector. So you had some icons, the industry icons, right, to the top levels at the government, right to the Prime Minister himself, mentioning that some of their industries need hand-holding, some of them are not yet there, whereby they can absorb certain shocks that may come under GST. So without giving the name away, Shereen, right now, I think it's important that some of those concerns, especially the working groups that have been set up, I think it's very clearly a signal right from the top that we are going to hear you. One important point, Shereen, that I picked up today, let's look ahead. You look at the headline today that came in one of the newspapers. It said the government is planning a mega outreach on GST. You look at the number of taxpayers who will need to move. Around 8 million taxpayers is the consensus who have to move to the GST regime. So many of them, millions of them are SMEs. They will need handholding, they will need education, they will need a push. And I can tell you, Shereen, from whatever I have been talking to the service tax department over the last 48, 72 hours, they are planning a massive outreach campaign among the professionals, among the trade bodies. In fact, there are a few meetings lined up even tomorrow in some of the big cities where the service tax commissioners are calling professionals, calling chartered accountants, calling all the practitioners, saying that this is how we need to move quickly for registration. We need quickly towards migration. I think you're going to see, Shereen, an unprecedented outreach, by the government to the industry as a whole,
absolutely right.
The SMEs specifically.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, Arun. Of that, I have no doubt. And in fact, that's exactly what we're picking up. Hurry, in exactly a minute before we head into our next break, what would you like to add to the table by way of clarifications that you would require from the next meeting of the GST Council?
Shereen, the working committee group is indeed been a welcome move, because my only concern about the whole working committee group having been constituted now and the recommendations to come by April 10th is that in each of the sectors that I've identified, there have been innumerable representations. And I don't think the center is not favorable to many of those suggestions, including centralized registrations or any of the other issues that other speakers have spoken about. The issues at the state level, and if you look at the working committee today, it's basically comprised of central officers. So the worry that I have is that, again, you will have to go back to the council where the states tend to dominate and get them sensitized to those issues. So the issue of centralized registration is more coming from the state. So that's my worry. And then the second fact is, you have on 31st March, the GST Council meeting, which is going to talk about the rules. Now, these rules have a direct linkage to issues that each of those sectors have. So how will they discuss and debate the rules prior to the April 10th recommendations by the so-called working committee members? So to me, these are all issues which need to be ironed out as quick as possible. And what Arun alluded to is very, very critical. The GST is going to be successful only if the entire value chain understands and leverages it. The ecosystem of vendors and retailers who are in the small tertiary towns are the ones who are going to have the biggest pain. So the outreach has to be massive. Outreach by corporates are being done, by outreach by government also is equally important. And the fact is, all these are coming in such waves. Just imagine, IT has to be ready, IT has to test, and IT has to go live on a cutover date of July 1st. It's absolutely a serious issue. And that's where the anxiety of the industry is coming from.
And the anxiety perhaps is valid. It is going to be a race against time. But gentlemen, hang in there. We're going to come back for our concluding segment here on our GST special, The Road to GST. Stay with us. We're back in a moment.